Hyvää päivää kaikille kuuntelijoille ympäri maailmaa. Tervetuloa Finlandia Foundation Nationalin puolesta meidän Finnposium-tapahtumaan. On hienoa, että olette kaikki täällä keskustelemassa savusaunasta. God dag till alla lyssnare runt om i världen. På uppdrag av Finlandia Foundation National, välkomna till vår Finnposium. Det är fantastiskt att ha er alla här för att diskutera savusauna. Greetings to all of our listeners from around the world, and welcome to our Finnposium event, which will be centered on an interesting topic today, smoke sauna or savusauna and more. My name is Tommy Flanagan, and I'm the Executive Director of Finlandia Foundation National. Our Finnposium events offer a platform for Finns, Finnish Americans, and friends of Finland to highlight interesting and important topics from around Finnish America and Finland. From film discussions to historical topics and culinary excursions and exclusive interviews, Finnposium always offers a chance to learn something new. So we're thrilled to have what I would call one of our Finlandia Foundation celebrities back for a conversation. You may remember him from his feature this past February during National Sauna Week 2024, where he partook in a panel in an engaging conversation entitled Traditional Knowledge, Folk Healing, and Magic. Frank Eld joins us from Idaho. His father migrated from Finland. He's an expert in construction, especially the unique Finnish method of leaving no gaps and requiring no chinking between the notched corners of expertly squared fitted logs. He's a retired educator, and he's on a mission to document and preserve the buildings made by Finnish immigrants to the US and Canada. In the summer of 2022, Frank went on a research trip to Finland and Sweden with a special interest in savusauna or smoke sauna and more. We are so pleased to have Frank here with us today. You're sure to learn something new. And if you were in our Finnposium a few weeks back, you may even find some intersections to the topic of forest fins. So I encourage you to listen closely to Frank today. So Frank, without further ado, help us welcome Frank to taking the smoke out of the mystery of the Savusauna and Savutupa. Frank, take it away.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the seminar. Thank you for all joining into this. It's always a pleasure to be able to share some information. I had a great trip to the Nordic countries last year to learn more about the Savusauna and the Savutupa. And that's what I'm going to share with you today, was some of the things that we learned and kind of take some of the smoke out of the mystery of the Savutupa and the Savusauna. So clearing out the smoke and around the Savusauna and the Savutupa. So hello, everybody. Hyvää päivää and kiitos for joining me today. When we want to hear a little bit about the smoke sauna, the Savusauna, and also the smoke cottage, the Savutupa. Although many of you may be unfamiliar with both or either of these, they are both iconic elements of our Finnish history and our Finnish culture. Whenever I mention them to most Finns and to all non-Finns, I get this puzzled look, and people shake their heads and they say something like, "Who would want to take a sauna in the smoke?" Or "Why would anyone want to live in a smokehouse?" And these are fair questions, and they're exactly the questions that I asked before I learned about the Savutupa and the Savusauna. So today, I hope to clear away some of the smoke surrounding the Savusauna and the Savutupa, and I am able to do this in part because of a Finlandia Foundation grant that allowed me last year to continue my research in Finnish log construction and the forest fins in Finland, Norway, and Sweden. Now, my goal is not only to become better educated in these areas, but to be able to share that information just like I am today with people like you who are interested in hearing about it. So welcome everyone. Thank you for being here and joining me for this. I am indebted to all of my research colleagues in Finland, Sweden, and Norway, who shared a lot of information with me when I was there, and you will see a lot of that in this presentation today. So let's take a look at the Savusauna. Let's talk about saunas. Now, if you're Finnish and you grew up like I did, taking saunas on Saturday night, it was probably in a wood-burning sauna that had a stove and a chimney, or at least a stovepipe. And unless you're over 100 years old, and quick look at the list, I don't see many people out there over 100 years old, you probably have never had the opportunity to take a smoke sauna in America. Now, most people are surprised to learn that all the smoke saunas that were built by Finns migrating to America were savusaunas. They were smoke saunas. Now, the earliest migration of Finns to America was in 1638 by those who came as settlers to the New Sweden colony in what is today Delaware, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. These forced Finns, as they were called, introduced the sauna, the savusauna, and also the log cabin to the American landscape. The first log cabin, an American architectural icon, was probably built by a Finn. One of my primary research objectives is to determine how these Finns constructed their log cabins and their saunas. Unfortunately, when they came, they were so preoccupied with settling in this new country and building these log cabins, they forgot to pull out their iPhones and forward me any pictures. So I'm having to do a lot of research about that. And that was part of my research this last year in the Nordic countries. Now, the first wave of Finns, excuse me, the second, pardon me. The second wave of Finns that came to America was known as the Great Migration. And this was between 1860 and 1920. They reintroduced the sauna to America, and they literally built hundreds of savusaunas as they settled throughout the country. Now, a large part of my research as I travel is in locating and documenting these early original log buildings, whatever they are, saunas, cabins, whatever. In my 11 years, well, 12 now, years of searching, I have found only one intact, unaltered smoke sauna, which is in Munson, Maine. So it's not surprising that most people are unfamiliar with the Savusauna. The question is, what happened to them? The second generation Finns either converted the old smoke sauna or they built a new one that had a smoke stove, a stove and a chimney, or at least a smoke pipe. From my generation of Finns on, the Finns just didn't want to be inconvenienced by the smoke. My mother, who did in fact grow up with the Savusauna, used to tell me, you know, somebody who went into the sauna was a real Finn if he came out cleaner than when he went in. Consequently, the use of the savusauna ceased, and as it faded from use, so did its historical memory. Except for the one in Munson, savusaunas in America have disappeared. Now, as a Finnish American historian, I wanted to really understand how a smoke sauna and a smoke tupa, a smoke cottage, worked, how they functioned. So my goal on my trip was to find, document, and experience at least once a historic savusauna and a savutupa in Finland or Sweden. I found dozens, as the pictures show. This is only a few of the savusaunas that I found, and these are all in one place in the sauna village in Finland. Now, hopefully, I can explain the three experiences that I did have clearly enough that you may also understand that the smoke sauna and the smoke tupa are not as ominous as what they may sound. My friend Risto Voile-Appila from Finland has provided this great sketch explaining the construction and the essential elements in a Finnish savusauna. Hopefully, this will be helpful as I describe our experience. So if you look at this sketch up here, go kind of over it, we of course have the regular roof, and below that we have a ceiling that is slightly higher than the bather. And on top of this ceiling is a layer of sand or sawdust for insulation to make a heat sink. Going up through there is the smoke vent, which allows the smoke to go out. Now, some of these had a smoke vent in the ceiling and in the wall, or one or the other. Also on the right-hand side, you see something you don't see in the US, and that is a drying rack. Because in Finland, these early saunas were used as drying sheds, also as a rihi for drying grain. We look over there, the bather is on a platform, sitting on a bench on a platform, which is higher than the gewis, so that you're above the fireplace gewis. And of course, he's got his water bucket and his ladle there so that he can toss some water on the hot rocks. And of course, he's holding on to his vita so that he can flog himself and get that circulation going. And in front of the gewis is the kettle or a pot that heats the water so you can wash in there. And of course, you have the washing bench. Now, my first sauna, smoke sauna in Finland, was in Eastern Finland with my friends Dalva Lemonmäki and her partner Pekka, who took us to a resort island near Koli Mountain, which had a large commercial style savusauna that they fired on a regular basis. And they were kind enough, the hosts waited until we got there in order that I could observe the entire process from lighting the fire until we jumped in the lake. And I'd like to, and it was a very invigorating experience. I can tell you that, and very enjoyable, and a great introduction to the sauna. So if you look at my pictures here, the first picture, they had their gewis was made of metal. Again, it was a commercial size, large, with the rocks on top. And number two, I'm holding the wood, and the emphasis there is the wood must be small so that it burns well. It must be very, very dry. And they usually use alder, which is one of the better burning woods. And after the fire has burned down, you see a number 3 and number 4 throw some dippers of water on the rocks that will remove the ash and any smoke out of the room. Number 5 shows you in the middle of the heating where that layer of smoke is, how everything is covered with smoke, and it's down to about, as you can see there, the seat level. But in number 6, this is when it's all done, that it's been heated up. And it's really important to look at number 6 and understand there is no smoke in that room when you take a sauna. Now, my next experience was in a little more personal and an intimate setting, which I'm going to describe kind of step by step. Seija Salen, who is the curator of the sauna village in Jämsä, Finland, arranged so that I could have a special heating of one of their saunas. Now, usually they only heat them in the weekend, 1 or 2 of them, depending on how many people are there. But she was very, very generous, very kind to work with my schedule and did this during the week. And her father, Ilkka, worked with us, fired up the sauna, and took care of the sauna. And so as we look at these pictures, step by step, have to open the vents, the ceiling vent, the wall vent. This particular sauna had both. And number 4, the preparation of the kuas for burning. The wood is piled in there very carefully with birch bark in between, because that's a great fire starter. And then in number 5, of course, you fire it and it begins to burn very quickly and very hot. And that's really important. In 6 and 7, you see the smoke as actually coming up through the rocks at the top of the kuas. You can't even basically see the rocks because of the smoke. The firebox is burning and it's so hot they have to damper it down some. And then we see Seija there as she's come in and put some more wood on the fire, because you keep the fire going for 4 or 5 hours until you've gotten the rocks really hot. Now, these pictures show that the smoke is literally pouring out of the building. It's coming through the vents in the roof, on the side. The door is open. It's coming out of the doors. It's coming all out, and that's why we see the vestiges, obviously, of the smoke around the door. And when it reaches about 500 degrees, which, as we see here, is Ilkka is holding up the thermometer, is 495 degrees. He lets the fire go out. It dies down completely. And then 6 and 7 are extremely important steps. He removes all of the ash. There is nothing left to burn in the sauna after you let the fire go down. While you're taking a sauna, there is no fire at all, so that there's no noxious gases being created by the fire or anything like that. So he clears them out completely. And we're ready to take a sauna, except for that one step. He pours 2 or 3 dippers of water on the hot rocks, creates the leula, the steam, and this steam carries the ash and any noxious gases that may be in the sauna are carried out with this steam. Now, this is an important step also, because as Finns, our ancestors occupy the sauna. They are the guardians of the sauna. So when you throw that leula there the first time, those first dippers, you're actually providing them with their sauna. So now that they've had their sauna, look at the next picture and you again see how clear it is. There's no smoke, no fire. This is just before I go in there. And in pictures 3 and 4, there I am enjoying the sauna and throwing some water with the big dipper on there with the long handle and getting some great Lola, and then coming out and sitting outside. Beautiful day we had. And then I'd go back in 3 or 4 more times and just enjoyed the sauna. And there was no temperature gauge in the particular sauna, but I've taken enough saunas that I'm going to gauge the temperature to be about 160. And I know my experience here in America, we kind of get it a little hotter than that sometimes. But in both of my experiences with the Savusauna in Finland, it was a little cooler, and we stayed in longer. And people say, well, why is it different? And the way I explain it is, it just feels softer. It's like a softer steam, a softer Lola that's created. So my experience with the Savusauna, I'd love to have one here in the United States. I really, really enjoyed it. We're going to change our emphasis here, and we're going to look at the Savutupa, the smoke cottage. Now, this is something that there are none here in this country and haven't been since colonial times. I show this farmstead here. This is the Niemela farmstead, which was moved intact from its original location in Finland to Savusauna Island Museum in Helsinki. Now, the upper left-hand corner, the first picture there, we see it's the Savutupa and the Savusauna. And I picked these because, number one, they're very early. The sauna is 1786, and the tupa itself is 1844. And they are very typical of the many tupas that I saw in both Finland and Sweden, in both their size and in their configuration. Now, pictures 3 and 4 show us the interior of the tupa. It's approximately 20 by 20 square log building, about 10 to 12 feet in height in the center of that ceiling. And as you can see, the ceiling is black. It's been smoked black. But it's important to note, as you look at that picture, especially you can see it in number 4, that the smoke is up at the ceiling. The blackness is at the ceiling. It's not at the lower parts of the wall. Now, photo number 5 shows us this is the heart of the Savutupa, and that's the Savuuni. It is the smoke oven. That's what creates the heat. That's what we're going to be talking about. But this is you see the Savuuni there. You see that stick that goes up, reaches the trap door that's in the ceiling that goes on up through the roof to allow the excess smoke to exit. Now, we're going to talk about the unit itself, the Savutupa and the oven, the Savuuni. The first picture I took of there's a brochure that's out that Per Nielsen did a very scientific study of the tupa. He put sensors, smoke, heat sensors all over the tupa, because his contention was they're very, very efficient. But people said, well, how do you know that? And so he proved it. They were very, very efficient, over 90%. The next picture there is the uni itself, the parts of it. This happens to be one that I took a photo of in Sweden. We see, starting at the top there, we have the spark guard. So when the fire is burning, and you'll see more about that, it diffuses the smoke, but it also protects the ceiling so that the sparks don't reach the ceiling. You see the smoke hole, that's where the smoke comes out of when it's burning in the firebox below. And then in front of it, you have a shelf that has a I call it a sink for want of a better word. It's kind of a coal pit, and where you can do some cooking. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then we look over at the next photograph there, and it's shows kind of a cutaway of this whole Savutupa. And so we have the uni, as we talked about the pieces there, and then you burn it, and the smoke comes up, and it shows it there. It lays along the roof, and that's the ceiling, not the ceiling, and that's where you get the blackness that you see in the ceiling of the tupa and kind of along the walls. But there's the vent that goes out through and lets the excess smoke escape out through the roof. And then I showed number 4 is a good close frontal view of the Niemela smoke oven and its parts and pieces. You can see the chains hanging down that have the pots that over the top of what I call the rock kind of sink there, where you put the coals in there and you can cook in there. And then in the last picture there, it talks about the firing of the oven itself, and I've lots of sketches, but I like this one by my friend Seppo Latvila. I think it explains it well, and it's maybe a little hard for you to read. The print's kind of small, but I'll explain it from the picture here. And you start the fire by placing the first pieces of wood transverse into the firebox. And this is called the underhead log. Call it a pillow log if you want. Onto which the remaining wood is stacked with a layer of birch bark in between those pieces of wood for the fire starter. The wood must be very dry in order that the fire will burn very hot. Critical that it burns very hot, which will totally consume the wood, particles of wood, and the noxious gases that are created in the burning. Now, the smoke initially sinks toward the floor when it's colder, when it starts. But as the fire heats up, you will see that the smoke rises and forms this warm layer under the ceiling above your head height. Now, in that number 3, you see the ceiling there, and it doesn't show well in this illustration, but the ceiling is there with the boards, and on top of that, just like we saw in the Savusauna, there's a layer of dirt. And this is a heat sink because it warms up and then gives off heat. Now, the uni is also used for cooking. After the fire has died down, the embers are pulled out forward into that coal pit that we saw up there in that second picture. And then you use a cooking pot, like we see in that picture 4. You can be hanging down from a chain, or you might have a tripod, and you put the tripod right over the embers, and you use that for cooking. It's good for baking. You put the bread inside of the oven, and the best parallel is like a pizza oven that we know today. It has the embers in the back, and you put the pizza in there. Well, this is how they bake bread. And you can also use it for baking meats or cooking meats. You would put the meat in a wooden truncheon, put it in there, put some sticks under it so that the heat will circulate around the entire thing, and leave it in there for several hours, and it will cook. Now, when you start the fire in the uni, the first day you burn it for 4 or 5 hours. But then succeeding days, you have to only burn it for an hour, because the stones of that large heat sink that's created there, that's why it's so large, retains that heat, as does that dirt insulation up in the ceiling. They retain that heat, and it keeps that room within 2 or 3, 4 degrees for 24 hours. And then the next day, you only have to burn it for an hour to bring it back up. So when they talk about the efficiency, when you think about this for a minute, if you had a fireplace and you wanted warmth from the fireplace, you have to burn it. You have to burn it constantly. Or you have a wood stove. You have a wood stove with a chimney. You have to burn it constantly to have heat. With this, with the oven, you only have to burn it 4 or 5 hours at first, and then burn it for an hour. Now, when you think of the consumption of wood, how much less consumption of wood, and again, how efficient it is. A fireplace is known to be about 40% efficient. The heat's going straight up through the chimney. In here, you're taking that smoke, you're leaving it in the room at the ceiling, you're getting the heat out of it before it then exits out through the vent. Now, savutupas have been used in Finland for over 1,000 years, going back to the Middle Ages. There's a reference to the savuuni written in Halikko, Finland in 1456. The actual origination of this style of oven goes back to Roman times. They have found an intact oven like this in the excavations of Pompeii. So the principle is old as dirt, as they say. Now, here's some miscellaneous information. Now, these early Finns believed in some magic. As we said, we have their ancestors in the sauna. Of course, we still believe that. But what they would do is when they built Oni, they would place a horse's skull in the foundation under it. And what this would guarantee that they would have a good house. It would be a safe house, keep away the evils that might be knocking at the door. And it would also protect the livestock. And they've actually found these when they've excavated there, taken out some of these unis, they found that horse's skull in there. Now, the question that people all ask me, what about your health? Isn't it terribly unhealthy? No, it's not. And that's why I go back to that first one. It says the Savutupa deserves a better reputation. It is not unhealthy. In fact, I'm going to really turn this around. It's more healthy than your neighbor. And here's why. Smoke is an antiseptic. So it's sanitizing this whole room all the time. And that's why they were using the Savusauna for birthing and for healing, because it was the most sanitized room available. So not only are you sanitizing the room, but you're in the uni is keeping out the smoke, is keeping out the pests that might be contagious, might be carrying diseases. They don't like to be in the smoke. They leave the room. So you actually have a healthier atmosphere than your neighbors. Now, the Savutupa was virtually discontinued about the mid-1800s. But some of them were still used up into the 1920s, as this photo illustrates. You see the little girl over there in front of the uni. She's got the cooking pot. She's doing some cooking there. The family's all gathered around. You see the black smoke up at the ceiling. It's a great photo. I love this photograph. But most of them were discontinued in the mid-1800s. Time and modernization ended their use. smoke cottages had a stigma assigned to them and to the people who lived there. They wanted to escape that. Also, the houses were getting larger. They had more rooms, and this only heated the one room. So they would have to use either fireplaces, or eventually they got some tiled stoves that they would use in the other rooms. And just like the Savusauna, people just didn't want to deal with the smoke, and they would add a chimney. They still kept the uni, but they added a chimney that went out through the roof. So they disappeared, even though they were the most efficient heating system you could have at the time. And I like to compare it to what we did about, I'm going to say 30, 40 or 50 years ago here in America. Is a lot of people put radiant heat in the ceilings of their houses. And this was radiant ceiling heat, along with that big bulky stone uni that gave out heat. Very, very efficient. Now, I would like to share with you my personal experience with the Savutupa. My visit to Kakkosen farm was arranged by Arpad Salo in Finland, who knew Jo's parents and had worked with them on this tupa back with some students when he had some students, and they restored the roof on this a number of years ago. And I was familiar with this tupa from Arpad's master's thesis, in which he discussed 8 forest fin savutupas in the Varmland section of Sweden, which is where many of the forest finns lived in Sweden. And so I toured. A number of those are available to the public. This one is not, because it is private and it's hard to access. But I was interested in this in particular, and I contacted Arpad. Arpad was generous enough. He contacted Jo, who immediately welcomed me to come and see his stupa. But if you notice in the floor plan, it's very original. The other savutupas that I saw had what they called a Swedish kitchen added to them, which was a cooking kitchen that was in this, look at this floor plan, would be in that little room off to the right. This one has never been altered. And I believe that this particular tupa best reflects what the forest Finns and the Finns would have brought with them when they came to America. I believe that this is what very much the first log cabin in America looked like. Now, Jo greeted me and agreed to show me the tupa, and he met me at the Finnskogen Museum. And when he did, I recognized him immediately, because he's kind of a celebrity over there in Sweden, because he's on some Forest Finns videos. And I had seen him on YouTube, so I knew who he was. But when he shook my hand, he handed me a small box of matches. And he said, "Frank, I understand that you want to experience a Savutupa." You can just imagine my joy. He said, "Today, you are going to light one." Now, we Finns aren't supposed to get really emotional, but I can tell you that was and still is a very emotional moment, because I felt that I was about to experience the holy grail of my research. And believe me, I was not disappointed. Jo drove me partway up the hill, and then he dropped me off, and he said, "I want you to walk from here up the ancestral trail." So I walked up about a kilometer, uphill on the original trail that had been used for centuries by the forest Finns as they accessed this forest farm. He met me there and explained to me about his ancestors. His grandparents had moved there in 1805, and they had built this particular tupa in 1867. And Yo began immediately to do the preparations. He opened up the shutters, went and got water from the well for fire protection, chopped the wood, got it ready, brought it in, opened up the vent in the ceiling that I told you about so that it was ready. So number 6, the savusauna awaits. And then he does something that I kind of unusual. He took a candle, lit a candle, and he put it in the firebox. And what this does is it creates a draft. It warms the area and it begins to create a draft. He then stacks the wood, as I explained to you before, very carefully with the birch bark in between. And then I lit the fire. I want you to examine these pictures carefully as I talk about them. The first one is very early on, and you'll note that the smoke is dark, it's black, you can't see through it at all, and it's hanging quite low. And then in number 2, as the fire heats up, the smoke begins to get a gray tint to it, and it begins to rise. And in number 3, you see me standing there. The smoke is above my head, it's burning, and there's a layer of smoke up at the ceiling. Number 4, Yo and I sat there in the tupa for 7 hours. I wanted to be there for the whole thing. For 7 hours, we sat, we ate, we talked, we laughed, we had a great time. And in 7 hours, I never had any irritation to my eyes. So people ask me, well, didn't you smell it? Well, it's kind of like sitting by a campfire. You kind of get the odor, the smell of the smoke from the campfire, but that's it. It's not irritating. It's kind of nice, pleasant. Who doesn't like the smell of a campfire? And so there we were. And eventually, number 5, you begin to look at the smoke, and it's very hot, and it's disappearing. Number 6, it is so hot that, as I mentioned before, there can be flames coming out of the smoke hole, and that's what you see. It's that hot, but it's consuming the wood, and it's consuming the particles, and that's what makes up the smoke color. And at the same time, it's consuming all noxious gases. The final picture there, number 7. Now, number 6, he had to damper it down even a little bit because it was burning so hot. Number 7, it's burning. There's smoke coming out, but you're not seeing it. And as we were in there, occasionally I would just have to reach up and feel it, feel the warmth up there, because you looked, you didn't see it anymore. And I tell people, look at that the next time you have a campfire. When you start it, it's smoky. But if you keep adding small pieces of wood, letting it burn very, very hot, it's still smoking because it's burning, but it's disappearing. And it's the same thing that happens here. So that layer of disappearing smoke is laying up along the ceiling, and it's warming the ceiling. It's warming that dirt that's up above the ceiling. It's making a heat sink there. At the same time, it's warming that oven. It's warming that mass of stone. So when it does go out, and he let it go on about 3 hours that day, it wasn't really warm, but it was beginning to warm up those stones. And anywhere I went in that room, it was perfectly heated. It was even heat. So it was very successful. Yep. Okay. Here we are. We are here in a real Savutupa with a savusauna, a smoke cottage with a smoke oven, and it's lit. The smoke is coming out. As you can see, the firebox, and then this is the vent hole. The smoke is coming out here. Once in a while, you'll see some sparks coming up. It hits the spark arrestor up here. This is how you protect this. But as it burns, the smoke comes up, but you can see that it's laying like a cloud here in the upper part of the ceiling. And it's important to note that this cabin is a little short because it's lost some of the logs. So this would normally be probably another 24 inches or so higher than this. But here I am, I'm under the smoke, basically, a little of it down here, but I'm here in the smoke with the smoke above my head. Okay. And that was it. That was my experience with a savusauna and a savutupa. And I hope that maybe today's presentation has taken away some of that onerous reputation that people might have about a smoke sauna or a smoke tupa, or I better understand it. So I want to thank you all again for joining in. And if you've got some questions, I'm open for some questions.
Thank you so much. Kiitos, Frank. That was so enlightening. I really like the last one, a very happy Finn. I mean, it was some of the most inspiring things to hear when you can tell that the person talking about it is passionate about what they do, you know, and that really comes through in everything you've said today. I mean, you really get the sense of that you do this not just because it's something that you fell into, but this is something that really matters to you. It's something that's important to you, and you really highlight you know, we were talking before the session, the importance of history, right? And looking back and saying, you know, what things of the past and what can we learn from that and sort of reconstruct that in today's world. And I think that in and of itself is an interesting thing for people to see. So thank you so much for your research and for your passion.
Well, again, thank you again, Finlandia Foundation, for helping make that possible, because I think it was really important. It was important to me, and hopefully I can share the importance and the information I got with others.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. We do have about 10 minutes for some questions. There was one question in the chat here that came from Ingmarie Bomelin from Sweden. She's a Forest Finn herself and actually joined us earlier for a Finnposium. And she asked a question, and maybe Dalva in the chat can answer this. She asked if it's called Savusauna because of Savulaks, which is a region. But my sense on that is that it doesn't have to do with that. Savusauna comes from smoke sauna. I'm not sure if Savulaks comes from Savu at some point, but I am not quite sure. So maybe you know about that, or Dalva, if you're still here in the chat, if you have any insight onto that.
I think that the name comes because it is smoke. Savusauna, smoke sauna. Savutupa. Tupa is one of the names that has been assigned to this one-room cabin. But I'm not saying there might be somewhere in history some connection. I'm not saying, but normally that's where we make the connection, is because they're both. And Dalva, if you got a word to say, we'd love to have you chime in here. Welcome to the group.
Absolutely. Yeah, one other thing that you mentioned today that was really new to me, I didn't really realize the efficiency, right? I think you mentioned efficiency of sort of a normal wood burning stove is about 40%. Of course, the savutupa is much higher than that. The fact that it retains heat for so long and you have to heat it less actually the next day. Um, you're making a good argument for dispelling any myths around the sort of bad parts of Savutupa, because that certainly is an interesting point today of the efficiency.
Oh, it is, and you know, today we're so ecologically oriented,
Yeah.
and we've kind of forgotten this little tidbit of history, but it was extremely efficient. And this was proven scientifically, and that's what it's really. It's not just somebody's opinion. They put sensors throughout this building, and they monitored for several days to come up with this percentages. So very scientific.
Yeah, I mean, so you've sort of made the efficiency argument for it, and you also talked about the fact that the smoke is antiseptic itself, right? So that actually, so there is a health argument. Could you talk about that again? Because I think that is probably the first misconception people have. Smoke sauna, smoke tupa. It's like, what do we do with this smoke?
Everybody says that. Everybody thinks that, myself included.
Yeah.
Because smoke is carcinogenic. Okay. And so if you think about it in your mind, it's smoke cottage, a smoke sauna. You think, okay, I'm sitting in this smoke. Well, you're not sitting in the smoke. And that's important. The smoke is there. You saw how it's down low for a very short time, and then it's up there. So you're not continually in the smoke at all. You're not breathing it, but the smoke has infiltrated the room in the beginning. So the pests say, hey, it's time to exit about now, and it sanitizes the room. So it is. It's really, and that was probably one of the most surprising things when I actually saw the proof of that. I kind of heard of it early on, but no, it's very efficient.
Yeah,
Very.
yeah, no, it's you know, we need to bring them back, right? I think you're making an argument more sauna, more savutupa, and there is a comment in here. I hope you can see the comments, Frank, from Ryan Brush in Washington State's talking about sort of getting some energy around a Finnish smoke sauna project on Orcas Island. In the Pacific Northwest there. He puts his email address in there. I can certainly connect you afterwards if you want, or anyone else. It's an interesting project. Yeah.
I see tons of comments and stuff here, and I want to again thank everyone for these, and hopefully you'll forward these to me so that I can get a chance to really talk about them. And I'm always willing, and I should have put it up and I didn't, but I'm going to give you anyone who wants to contact me my email, and that is the letters Finn, Finn. What a surprise! Huh? I am at iCloud.com. It's as simple as that. And you are welcome to email me, contact me with your comments and questions. I'm always, or if you know of a sauna somewhere or some buildings, whatever, I'm always searching. I'm always documenting Finnish buildings.
Absolutely. There is another one here from Margaret Feibel asks if the Savutupa at Savusauna was the ceiling versus roof still intact. Was that all intact?
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. It's a perfect, yeah, it's all there. It's all been very well preserved. And I had a great conversation with the young lady who was in that, I think she was in that picture, was the guide there. And in all honesty, she didn't even know how it worked. And so when I was able to explain to her after having my experience in Sweden, I came back. I was twice in Savusauna, and I was able to explain it to her exactly, so she understands it. So they're very, very authentic at Savusauna Island Museum, and it's all there, and it's the original black smoke, believe me.
Well, speaking of the smoke, another question from Norman Ford came in. If it's necessary to scrub the seats in a smoke sauna due to the smoke buildup over time. I have no clue.
Well, You can, people like to wipe them down, but the smoke creates a coating. So it's not like if you sit in it, it's going to be, uh, eventually they get coated black. But when you first go in, a lot of people that I talk to, they just sweep them off. Uh, in today's modern day and age, people come in with mats and they set the mats down for hygienic purposes and all that kind of stuff. Uh, but no, they the you can. I mean, you can scrub them down and make them clean, but the
Mm,
walls and basically they stay as they are.
okay. Fantastic. We have another one here from Oscar Heikkinen up in Copper Country, I believe, talking about he's interested in the smoke in the Savutupa, if it ever descended lower and if the smoke, as the smoke cooled, or does it really all vent out?
Vents out. It
It
vents
all,
out. It doesn't come back down. No, it vents out
okay.
because you have vents in the wall. There's small vents in the wall, and it carries a draft through. And so after the fire goes out, the smoke then will be exiting out through the vent. No, it's a good question though. It's only down there fairly close to the floor for a very short time when you first start because smoke comes out, kind of goes down, and then as it heats, it goes up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. And then another one from Norman Ford. This is a really good one, and this comes up a lot during National Sauna Week conversations for the people who think, maybe I want to build something myself. It says, do you know where the fire insurance companies stand on open fires in buildings in Finland? I mean, I'm sure it's a completely different relationship.
We do. As a matter of fact, this was very much a conversation because in Sauna Village, the fire rules in Finland are no less stringent than they are right here.
Hmm.
They require them if and I don't know if you paid a lot of attention, but if any of them that they use, they are mortared in, used with fire brick,
Hmm.
so that there's no chance of it fire getting out. Uh, and then they build it with the brick over the top, and then it comes up through. It has holes there, vent, and smoke comes up through. And then on the ceiling, and I didn't show this, but on the ceiling, there is a fire guard. There's a
Hmm.
metal guard, and they can protect the walls also from that. So they're because historically, Finnish saunas burned down. I mean, if you didn't, you were lucky. Uh, I mean, in my own experience here in America, with my wood burning saunas up in Roseberry, I had a fire twice in there, and I had a stove and everything else, but it's extremely hot, spontaneous combustion. Yeah, so yeah, it's a problem, but they do guard against that in the ones that are functioning. Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure there are those modern safeguards that have to be implemented. But I feel like a lot of sauna stories when you're talking about specific sites of saunas, there's always that one thing. It's like, oh, and then the sauna burnt down, but then they rebuilt it, and there's always some part of that in it. So you know, it's sort of a natural thing. So, well, thank you so much. That was all the questions we had here. We're right at the hour. Um, do you have any last things you want to mention, Frank? Or
Again, I'm quickly going down through this list. Hello, everyone. There's so many people in here that I know, and I thank you for tuning in today, uh, for listening to this, and you're always welcome to contact me. And the other thing that I'd like to throw in here is at the University of Pittsburgh, where we are doing the Finnish classroom,
hmm
actually uh, replicating a Finnish stupa, as that's what the classroom is going to be. It's going to be a smoke cottage room, which is really quite interesting. And so in keeping alive early Finnish history, we're doing it through the Finnish room. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, I encourage you to uh, get the Finnish classroom, the University of Pittsburgh nationality rooms, Finnish classroom. We are still short on our fundraising. We had raised what they required. The bids came in considerably higher, so we're trying to raise some money so we can build it. But we're at the planning stages now. I mean, getting the plans together to build.
Absolutely. I can also encourage people to look at that project. It's a really important cultural and historical one. And I also want to put a plug in. You can catch Frank and Finlandia Foundation National more generally at FinFest this coming July in Duluth. So please go onto the FinFest website and check out what interesting programs they have. Frank will be there, Finlandia Foundation, and sort of all of our friends. So I hope to see many of you there. But I want to thank you, Frank, for your time. This has been absolutely fantastic. I look forward to seeing you again. And thanks for everybody who joined us from across the world, really. We had Sweden, Finland, all over the US here. So that's fantastic. So have a wonderful day, Frank and everybody else. And hyvää päivän jatkoa.
Kiitos paljon. Bye bye.
Kiitos teille. Heippa.